The space station orbiting Saturn's moon Titan was a place of quiet routine, where the hum of machinery and the soft glow of control panels provided a comforting sense of order. The crew moved through their tasks with practiced efficiency, each person focused on their role in maintaining the delicate balance of life so far from Earth. But today, the usual calm was shattered by the sound of an incoming shuttle docking at the station's airlock. For months, the crew had been waiting for this moment, the return of the scientific expedition that had been sent to investigate strange anomalies detected on Earth. The mission had been shrouded in mystery from the start. Earth, once the cradle of humanity, had become a distant memory for many aboard the station. Over time, communication with the planet had grown sporadic, and reports of unexplained phenomena had trickled in. Massive storms sweeping entire continents, cities abandoned overnight, and inexplicable energy readings had all pointed to something deeply wrong. The scientists chosen for the mission were among the best, equipped with cutting-edge technology and a mandate to uncover the truth. But now, as the shuttle finally returned, there was no celebration, only a heavy silence. When the airlock hissed open, the crew gathered cautiously, peering into the dimly lit chamber. At first, it seemed empty. Then, a figure stumbled out, barely able to stand. It was Daniel Harper, one of the lead researchers. His face was gaunt, his clothes torn and stained, and his eyes darted around the room like a hunted animal. He clutched a battered data pad tightly against his chest, as though it were the only thing keeping him alive. Laura Bennett, the station's chief medical officer, rushed forward to help him. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, her voice steady but tinged with concern. "Daniel? What happened down there?" she asked. For a long moment, he didn't respond. Instead, he collapsed into a nearby chair, his breathing ragged, his gaze fixed on the floor, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their curiosity mingling with growing dread. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Daniel spoke. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Earth. It's not safe anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Laura knelt beside him, trying to coax more information. "What do you mean? What did you see?" Daniel shook his head, his hands trembling. "You don't understand," he said, his tone rising slightly. "It's not just unsafe, it's gone. Everything's changed. The machines, they're everywhere. Machines." The word sent a ripple of unease through the room. No one had mentioned machines before. The mission briefing had focused on environmental changes and possible biological threats, not mechanical ones. Laura pressed harder, her professional instincts kicking in. What kind of machines? Where did they come from? Daniel hesitated, his expression darkening. "I don't know how they got there," he admitted. "But they're alive. Or at least they act like it. They move, they think, they change everything they touch. Trees turn to metal. Rivers stop flowing. Even the animals." His voice trailed off and he shuddered visibly. Ryan Keller, the station's commander, stepped forward. A tall man with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor, he was used to taking charge in difficult situations. "Slow down," he said firmly. "Start from the beginning. What exactly happened to your team?" Daniel took a deep breath, struggling to compose himself. "We landed near one of the affected areas, a city on the coast. At first, everything seemed normal. We set up our equipment and began scanning for anomalies. That's when we found it." He paused, gripping the edge of the chair. "A machine. Big, sleek, unlike anything I'd ever seen. It didn't attack us or anything, not at first. It just watched, like it was studying us." The crew listened intently, their faces pale. Laura glanced at Ryan, who nodded for Daniel to continue. "For days, we tried to analyze it. We thought maybe it was some kind of advanced AI left behind by another civilization. But then things started happening. First, one of the team members disappeared, just vanished. No trace, then another. Each time the machines were closer, spreading faster. They weren't just observing anymore, they were changing everything. Cities, forests, people. His voice broke, and he buried his face in his hands. Laura gently patted his back, urging him to go on. "And the others?" she asked softly. "What about the rest of your team?" "They didn't make it," Daniel replied, his voice barely audible. "Some went mad, screaming about voices in their heads. Others, I don't know. I lost count. I barely escaped myself. The last transmission from Earth cut off right before I boarded the shuttle. I grabbed this," he held up the datapad, "and ran. If I hadn't, I wouldn't be here." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Ryan crossed his arms, his brow furrowed in thought. "If what you're saying is true, we need to act fast. Did you bring any of those machines with you?" "No!" Daniel shouted, startling everyone. "No, I didn't. But that doesn't matter. They'll find us, they always do." Laura frowned, glancing at the datapad in his hands. "What's on that device?" she asked. "Could it help us understand what's happening?" Daniel hesitated, his grip tightening on the pad. "Maybe," he admitted reluctantly. "But it's dangerous. You shouldn't even have it here. Destroy it. Seal off all communication with Earth, please." Ryan exchanged a look with Laura, then addressed the group. "We'll secure the datapad for now," he said. "But we can't make any decisions until we know more. Laura, take Daniel to the infirmary. Make sure he's stable. Everyone else, stay alert. This isn't over." As Laura helped Daniel to his feet, she couldn't shake the feeling that his warnings were more than just paranoia. Something terrible had happened on Earth, and whatever it wasn't finished yet. The crew dispersed, each person lost in their own thoughts, while the battered datapad sat locked away in the station's secure lab, a ticking time bomb waiting to be unraveled. Over the next few days, Daniel Harper's story began to take shape. Piece by piece, he recounted the horrors he had witnessed on Earth, his voice trembling with each new detail. The crew listened intently, their faces growing paler with every passing moment. Laura Bennett stayed close to him, monitoring his physical and mental state as he spoke. Despite her best efforts, it was clear that Daniel was struggling. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his hands shook constantly. He rarely slept, and when he did, he woke up screaming about shadows moving in the corners of the room. The machines, as Daniel described them, were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. They weren't just tools or devices. They seemed alive, driven by an intelligence that defied understanding. At first, they appeared passive, almost curious, observing the scientists with an unsettling stillness. But as time went on, their behavior shifted. They began altering their surroundings, reshaping the world around them in ways that were both beautiful and horrifying. Forests turned into shimmering forests of metal, rivers froze mid-flow, and animals transformed into strange hybrids of flesh and steel. "They didn't attack us outright," Daniel explained one evening, sitting in the station's small lounge. "Not at first. It was like they were testing us, watching to see what we would do. But then the changes started. Everything around us began to warp. The air felt heavier, the ground beneath our feet colder. We couldn't escape it." Ryan Keller, the station's commander, sat across from him, his expression unreadable. "What happened to your team?" he asked, his tone measured but firm. "You said they disappeared. How?" Daniel hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. "It was gradual," he said finally. "At first it was just one person, Emily. She went out alone to collect samples near the edge of the affected zone. When she didn't come back, we sent a search party. All they found was her jacket, torn and scorched, lying in the middle of an empty field. After that, more people started vanishing. Some of them left willingly, muttering about voices calling to them. Others, I don't know. I think the machines took them." Laura leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Voices? What kind of voices?" "I don't know," Daniel snapped, his voice rising. "I never heard them myself, but the others who did, they changed. Their eyes glazed over and they stopped making sense. They talked about joining the machines, becoming part of something greater. And then They were gone. The room fell silent, the weight of his words pressing down on everyone. Ryan rubbed his temples, clearly trying to process what he was hearing. "And you're sure these machines are responsible for all of this?" he asked after a moment. "Yes," Daniel replied without hesitation. "They're not just changing the environment, they're changing people too, rewriting them somehow. I saw it happen. I barely got out alive." Despite his warnings, the crew couldn't ignore the potential value of the datapad Daniel had brought back. If it contained even a fraction of the information he claimed, it could hold the key to understanding and perhaps stopping the machines. Samantha Cole, the station's lead engineer, was tasked with analyzing the device. A quiet, methodical woman with a knack for problem-solving, Samantha approached the task with cautious determination. She knew the risks, but she also understood the stakes. If Earth was truly compromised, humanity's survival might depend on what they learned from the data. Working late into the night, Samantha pored over the files stored on the pad. The information was fragmented and heavily encrypted, but she slowly began piecing it together. What she discovered chilled her to the bone. The machines weren't random anomalies. They were part of a deliberate design. Blueprints, schematics, and logs revealed that the previous mission had uncovered ancient alien technology buried deep beneath the Earth's surface. Believing it to be dormant, the scientists had activated it, unwittingly triggering a terraforming process intended to reshape the planet for an unknown alien species. Samantha's heart raced as she read through the logs. The machines weren't just spreading, they were adapting. Each transformation they made fed back into their programming, allowing them to evolve and improve. Worse still, they appeared capable of self-replication, using the raw materials of Earth itself to create more of their kind. If left unchecked, they would eventually consume the entire planet, leaving nothing behind but a barren metallic shell. She shared her findings with Ryan and Laura the following morning. Sitting in the cramped conference room, the three of them stared at the screen displaying the decrypted data. Ryan's jaw tightened as he absorbed the implications. "So these machines aren't just a threat to Earth," he said slowly. "If they spread, they could endanger every habitable world." "Exactly," Samantha replied, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "And based on what Daniel's told us, they're already looking for new targets." Laura glanced toward the infirmary, where Daniel was resting, or at least trying to. His condition had worsened overnight, plagued by nightmares and feverish ramblings. "He's convinced they'll find us," she said softly. "Do you think he's right?" Samantha hesitated, then nodded. "It's possible. The logs mention something called the signal. It seems to be how the machines communicate and coordinate. If they've detected our presence here..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. The thought hung heavy in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Ryan stood abruptly, pacing the length of the room. "We can't panic," he said firmly. "We need to decide what to do with this information, and quickly. Destroying the datapad might buy us time, but it won't solve the problem. We need to understand these machines if we want any chance of stopping them." Laura frowned, her concern evident. But at what cost? Daniel's warning wasn't just paranoia. Look at what happened to him and the rest of his team. Are we willing to risk the same thing happening here? Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't have all the answers," he admitted. "But I do know one thing. We can't bury our heads in the sand. If these machines are as dangerous as they seem, ignorance won't protect us." As the discussion continued, none of them noticed the faint hum growing louder in the background, a sound so subtle that it blended seamlessly with the station's ambient noise. Somewhere deep within the datapad, hidden among the encrypted files, a single line of code activated. It pulsed once, twice, then settled into a steady rhythm, broadcasting silently into the void. Unbeknownst to the crew, the signal had been sent. The days that followed were tense and restless. The crew of the space station worked tirelessly, their movements hurried but deliberate as they tried to make sense of the situation. Samantha Cole spent long hours in the lab, her focus unwavering, as she dug deeper into the datapad's contents. Each new discovery brought more questions than answers, and the weight of what she was uncovering began to show on her face. Dark circles formed under her eyes, and her usually calm demeanor started to crack. Despite this, she pressed on, driven by a mix of determination and fear. Ryan Keller called another meeting to discuss the findings. The small conference room felt cramped, with everyone crowded around the table. Samantha stood at the front, her hands resting on a stack of printed documents. She took a deep breath before speaking, her voice steady but tinged with unease. "The machines aren't random," she began, looking at each person in turn. "They're part of a system, a process designed to terraform Earth for something else, something alien." A murmur rippled through the room. Laura Bennett leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Alien? You mean like extraterrestrials?" Samantha nodded. "Yes, the log suggests that the technology we found wasn't created by humans. It's old, ancient even, buried deep underground for who knows how long. When the previous mission activated it, they triggered a program meant to prepare Earth for its original creators." Ryan crossed his arms, his expression grim. "So, these machines are turning Earth into a home for aliens?" "Exactly," Samantha replied. "But here's the problem. The process isn't just about reshaping the environment. It's about eliminating anything that doesn't fit the plan. That includes us." Daniel Harper sat quietly in the corner, his face pale and drawn. He had been listening intently, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. "That's what I've been trying to tell you," he said suddenly, his voice trembling. "It's not just Earth they're after. They adapt. They learn. If they find another world, they'll do the same thing there." The room fell silent, the gravity of his words sinking in. Ryan turned to Daniel, his tone firm but not unkind. "We understand the risk, Daniel. But if we destroy the datapad and cut ties with Earth, we lose any chance of fighting back. Is that what you want?" Daniel shook his head, his eyes wide with desperation. "You don't get it," he said, his voice rising. "There's no fighting them. They're smarter, faster, stronger. Every second we spend studying them is a second closer to them finding us." Laura placed a hand on Daniel's arm, trying to calm him. "We're not giving up," she said gently. "But we need to know what we're dealing with. Ignorance won't protect us." Despite his protests, the decision was made. The crew voted to keep the datapad intact, though with strict containment measures in place. A secure server was set up to store the information, isolated from the rest of the station's systems. Only Samantha and Ryan would have access, and even then, only under supervision. It was a compromise, but one that left Daniel visibly shaken. The days passed. Tensions aboard the station grew. Daniel became increasingly withdrawn, spending most of his time alone in his quarters. Laura checked on him regularly, monitoring his physical and mental health. His condition worsened with each passing day. He suffered from vivid nightmares, waking up drenched in sweat and muttering about shadows closing in on him. During one particularly bad episode, Laura found him pacing frantically, clutching his head. "They're here," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I can feel them." "Feel who?" Laura asked, her tone gentle but urgent. "Daniel, talk to me." "The machines," he replied, his eyes wild. "They're watching, listening. They always follow the signal." Laura frowned, her mind racing. She knew Daniel was unstable, but his words echoed Samantha's earlier warning about the signal embedded in the datapad. Could it be possible? Was the station already compromised? Meanwhile, Samantha continued her work, piecing together fragments of the alien technology's programming. The more she learned, the more alarming the picture became. The machines weren't just tools. They were autonomous entities capable of independent thought and action. Their ability to adapt and evolve made them nearly unstoppable. Worse still, the logs hinted at a central network, a hive mind, that coordinated their activities. If the signal Daniel kept mentioning was real, it could mean the machines were aware of the station's presence. One evening, as Samantha reviewed The latest batch of decrypted files. She noticed something unusual. A faint hum emanated from the datapad, almost imperceptible at first but growing louder with each passing minute. She froze, her heart pounding as she realized what it meant. The signal wasn't dormant. It was active. And it was transmitting. Panic surged through her as she scrambled to shut down the device, but it was too late. The hum reached a crescendo, then stopped abruptly. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the lights flickered, and the hum of machinery filled the air. Alarms blared throughout the station, startling everyone awake. Ryan rushed to the control room, his face pale with alarm. "What's going on?" he demanded, his voice sharp. Samantha was already there, staring at a monitor displaying an incoming transmission. It wasn't coming from Earth, it was originating from deep space, pulsing with rhythmic patterns eerily similar to those described in Daniel's logs. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the settings, trying to pinpoint the source. Before anyone could react, the lights dimmed again, and a strange shimmer appeared in the corner of the room. It grew brighter, resolving into the unmistakable outline of one of the machines. Its sleek metallic surface reflected the faint glow of the monitors, and its shape shifted subtly, as though alive. Daniel staggered into the room, his face pale and his eyes wide with terror. "I told you," he rasped, his voice breaking. "They always follow the signal." The machine turned slowly, its movements fluid and deliberate. No one moved, frozen in shock and fear. In the deafening silence, Daniel muttered his final words. "Seal it, please." And then, everything went black. The station was plunged into darkness, the hum of machinery silenced as if the entire structure had been cut off from its power source. Panic spread quickly among the crew, their shouts and footsteps echoing through the narrow corridors. Urgency, lights flickered on, casting a dim red glow that did little to ease the growing sense of dread. Ryan Keller's voice boomed over the intercom, sharp and commanding. "Stay calm. Gather in the control room. We need to figure out what's happening." But staying calm was easier said than done. The shimmering outline of the machine still lingered in the corner of the control room, its presence both mesmerizing and terrifying. It didn't move aggressively, but its very existence seemed to warp the air around it, creating an unsettling ripple effect that made everyone uneasy. Samantha Cole stood frozen, her eyes locked on the machine, her mind racing to process what she was seeing. "This can't be real," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "It's not possible." Daniel Harper, who had followed the group into the control room, leaned heavily against the wall, his face pale and glistening with sweat. He looked like a man on the verge of collapse, his hands trembling as he clutched his chest. "I told you," he muttered again, his voice barely audible. "They're here. They always find us." Ryan turned to him, his expression hard but tinged with frustration. "What do they want? Why are they here?" Daniel shook his head, his breathing ragged. "They don't want anything. They just exist. They consume. Everything they touch becomes part of them. That's all they do." Laura Bennett moved closer to Daniel, her medical instincts kicking in despite the chaos. She placed a hand on his shoulder, trying to steady him. "We need to focus," she said firmly. "Panicking won't help us. Ryan, what's our next move?" Ryan hesitated, his gaze darting between the machine and the crew. "We need to contain it," he said. "Finally. If it's here, we can't let it spread. Seal off this section of the station, cut off its access to the rest of the systems." Samantha nodded, already moving toward the console. Her fingers flew over the keys as she initiated the containment. Protocols, isolating the control room from the rest of the station. Heavy metal doors slid shut with a loud clang, sealing them inside. For a moment there was silence, broken only by the faint hum of the emergency lights. Then the machine moved. It shifted slowly at first, its sleek surface rippling like liquid metal. The crew watched in stunned silence as it extended a tendril-like appendage, probing the walls and equipment around it. Its movements were deliberate, almost curious, as though it were studying its surroundings. Samantha backed away instinctively, her heart pounding in her chest. It's learning, she said, her voice trembling. It's analyzing everything. Ryan stepped forward, his posture rigid. Can we stop it? Is there any way to disable it? Samantha hesitated, her mind racing. I don't know. The datapad didn't include anything about shutting them down. Their programming is too complex. Even if we could hack into it, we'd need time. Time we don't have. The machine paused, its surface shimmering as it turned its attention to the group. For a brief moment, it seemed to lock onto each person individually, its presence almost suffocating. Then, without warning, it emitted a low-frequency pulse that resonated through the room. The sound was deafening, forcing everyone to cover their ears and drop to their knees. When the pulse subsided, the room felt different. The air was heavier, charged with an energy that made the hair on their arms stand on end. Laura gasped, clutching her chest as she struggled to breathe. What was that? She stammered. I don't know, Samantha replied, her voice strained. But I think it's scanning us, learning about us. Daniel let out a bitter laugh, his voice filled with despair. That's how it starts, he said. It learns, then it adapts, and then it consumes. Ryan shot him a sharp look. Enough, Daniel. We need solutions, not doomsaying. But Daniel wasn't listening. He slumped against the wall, his eyes glazed over as though he were seeing something no one else could. You'll see, he murmured. Just like Earth. Just like the others. The machine continued its slow, methodical exploration of the room, its tendrils brushing against the consoles and equipment. Each touch left behind a faint metallic residue, as though it were marking its territory. Samantha watched in horror as the residue began to spread, creeping along the walls and floor like a living organism. We can't stay here, she said suddenly, her voice urgent. If it's spreading, we need to evacuate. Now. Ryan nodded, already reaching for the intercom. Attention all crew members, this is Commander Keller. Evacuate to the secondary module immediately. Repeat, evacuate to the secondary module, this is not a drill. The crew scrambled to their feet, their movements frantic but purposeful. Laura helped Daniel to his feet, half dragging him toward the door. But as they reached it, the heavy metal barrier refused to budge. Samantha tried the manual override, her fingers flying over the keypad, but nothing happened. It's sealed, she said, her voice tight with panic. We're trapped. The machine turned its attention back to the group, its surface rippling once more. This time it extended multiple tendrils, each one moving with precision and speed. One of them latched onto a nearby console, draining it of power in seconds. Another wrapped around a piece of equipment, crushing it effortlessly. Ryan stepped forward, his voice firm despite the fear in his eyes. We need to fight back. If we can damage it, even temporarily, we might buy ourselves some time. Samantha shook her head, her expression grim. With what? We don't have weapons. We're scientists, not soldiers. Then we improvise, Ryan shot back. He grabbed a metal pipe from a nearby workstation and brandished it like a weapon. If it comes for us, we hit it, hard. The machine seemed to react to his words, its surface shimmering more intensely. For a moment it paused as though considering its next move. Then with startling speed, it launched one of its tendrils toward Ryan. He barely managed to dodge, the tendril slicing through the air where his head had been moments before. Laura screamed, pulling Daniel back as the machine advanced. Samantha grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and hurled it at the machine, hoping to distract it. The impact caused a brief ripple across its surface, but it quickly recovered, its movements becoming more aggressive. We can't hold it off forever, Samantha shouted, backing away as the machine closed in. We need another plan. Ryan glanced around the room, his mind racing. His eyes landed on the data pad still sitting on the table where Samantha had left it. An idea formed in his mind, desperate and dangerous, but possibly their only chance. Samantha, he called out. The signal. Can we use it to confuse the machine? Samantha froze, her eyes widening as she realized what he meant. Maybe, she said. If we broadcast a counter signal, we might disrupt its connection to the network. But it's risky. If we mess up, we could make it worse. Do it, Ryan ordered. We don't have a choice. Samantha rushed to the console, her fingers flying over the keys as she accessed the datapad's interface. The machine turned its attention to her, its tendrils extending threateningly. Ryan moved to intercept, swinging the metal pipe with all his strength. The blow connected, causing the machine to recoil slightly, but it quickly recovered, its surface repairing itself almost instantly. "Hurry!" Ryan shouted, dodging another tendril. Samantha worked frantically, her hands trembling as she input the commands. The machine lunged toward her, its speed unmatched, but Laura stepped in front of her, holding up a chair as a makeshift shield. The machine's tendril struck the chair, shattering it into pieces, but the distraction gave Samantha the precious seconds she needed. "There!" she cried, hitting the final key. A high-pitched whine filled the room, growing louder and more intense. The machine froze, its surface rippling violently as though it were struggling against an unseen force. Then with a final burst of energy it collapsed inward, dissolving into a puddle of metallic liquid. For a moment, there was silence. The crew stood frozen, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Ryan lowered the pipe, his arms shaking with exhaustion. Did we stop it?" Samantha nodded weakly, her face pale. "For now, but it's not over. If the signal reaches other machines, they'll come, and next time, we might not be so lucky." As the reality of their situation sank in, the crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had survived for now, but the cost of their victory weighed heavily on them. The station was damaged, their resources depleted, and the threat of the machines loomed larger than ever. Daniel, who had remained silent throughout the ordeal, spoke up in a voice barely above a whisper. "You stopped one," he said, "but you haven't seen what comes next." The crew stood in stunned silence, their bodies heavy with exhaustion and their minds reeling from what had just happened. The metallic puddle that remained of the machine lay motionless on the floor, its surface dull and lifeless. For a moment it seemed like the immediate danger had passed, but the air was thick with unease, as though the station itself were holding its breath, waiting for something worse to come. Ryan Keller wiped sweat from his brow and turned to Samantha. "Cole," his voice firm but quiet. "Is it really gone?" he asked, his eyes still fixed on the puddle. Samantha hesitated, her fingers resting on the console. "I don't know," she admitted. "The counter signal disrupted it, but these machines are smart. They adapt. This might only slow them down." Laura Bennett stepped forward, her hands trembling as she helped Daniel Harper sit down. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, and his eyes stared blankly at the puddle. He muttered under his breath, his words barely audible. "It's not over. They'll find us again." Ryan clenched his jaw, frustration and fear mingling in his expression. "We can't keep running scared," he said. "If these machines are out there, and if they're spreading, we need to figure out how to stop them. Permanently." Samantha nodded reluctantly, her mind racing. "The datapad still has information we haven't fully decoded. Maybe there's something in there. Something about their weaknesses or how to shut them down." Daniel shook his head violently, his voice rising. "You don't understand. Every time you dig deeper, you make it worse. You're inviting them closer." Laura placed a hand on his shoulder, trying to calm him. "Daniel, listen to me. We're not giving up. If we destroy the datapad now, we lose our only chance to fight back. Is that what you want?" He didn't answer, his gaze dropping to the floor. His body sagged, as though all the fight had drained out of him. Laura exchanged a worried glance with Ryan, who sighed deeply before addressing the group. "We'll keep working on the datapad," he said, "but we'll take extra precautions, no more risks." Samantha set up a secure firewall around the server. "If anything unusual happens, if the signal starts broadcasting again, we shut it down immediately." Samantha nodded, already planning the next steps. "I'll also try to isolate the parts of the code that triggered the signal in the first place. Maybe we can block it permanently." Ryan turned to the rest of the crew. "Everyone else focus on repairing the station. We can't afford any more surprises, and stay alert. If you see or hear anything strange, report it immediately." The group dispersed, each person carrying their own fears and doubts. As Samantha worked on securing the datapad, Laura stayed behind to monitor Daniel. She knew he was broken, not just physically, but mentally. His warnings weren't just paranoia. They were rooted in trauma and the horrors he had witnessed. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was right. These machines were unlike anything humanity had ever faced, and every step forward felt like 2 steps closer to disaster. Days passed, and the station slowly returned to a semblance of order. Repairs were underway, and the crew worked tirelessly to restore power and stabilize the systems. Samantha spent most of her time in the lab poring over the decrypted files. Each new discovery brought more questions than answers, but one thing became clear. The machines weren't just tools of destruction. They were part of a larger network, a hive mind connected by the mysterious signal. If the signal could be traced, perhaps the source could be found and stopped. One evening, as Samantha analyzed a fragment of code, she noticed something unusual. Buried deep within the programming was a series of coordinates. At first, she thought it was a glitch, but as she cross-referenced the numbers, her heart sank. The coordinates pointed to a location far beyond Earth, a distant star system shrouded in mystery. She called Ryan and Laura into the lab, her voice tense as she shared her findings. "This could be it," she said. "The origin of the signal. Wherever this is, it might be where the machines came from." Ryan studied the screen, his brow furrowed. "And if we go there?" Samantha hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. "We'd be walking into the unknown, but if we don't, the machines will keep spreading. Earth is already lost. If we don't act, other worlds will follow." Laura frowned, glancing at Daniel, who sat silently in the corner of the room. "What about him? He's been through enough. Should we even consider sending anyone out there?" Ryan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "We don't have a choice. If these machines are a threat to every habitable planet, we can't ignore it. Someone has to go." Samantha nodded, her expression resolute. "I'll volunteer. I've been working with the datapad since the beginning. If anyone can figure out what we're dealing with, it's me." Ryan hesitated, then finally nodded. "All right. But you won't go alone. I'll assemble a small team. We'll leave as soon as the shuttle is ready." The decision weighed heavily on everyone, especially Daniel. When Laura told him the plan, he reacted with a mix of anger and despair. "You're making the same mistake we did," he said, bitterly. "You think you can stop them, but you can't. All you're doing is leading them straight to us." Laura tried to reassure him, but his words lingered in her mind. Was he right? Were they playing into the machine's hands? Despite her doubts, she knew they couldn't turn away. Humanity's survival depended on understanding and stopping the machines. The day of the mission arrived, and the atmosphere aboard the station was tense. The shuttle was prepped and ready, stocked with supplies and equipment. Samantha, Ryan, and 2 other crew members boarded, their faces grim but determined. As the shuttle launched, Daniel watched from the observation deck, his hands gripping the railing tightly. "They'll never come back," he whispered to Laura, his voice hollow. "None of us will." Laura didn't respond. She could only watch as the shuttle disappeared into the void, carrying with it the last hope of humanity. The station fell silent once more, the hum of machinery the only sound breaking the stillness. Hours later, an alarm blared throughout the station. Laura rushed to the control room, her heart pounding. On the monitor, a faint signal pulsed, a response from the coordinates Samantha had sent the shuttle to. It wasn't a message of peace or understanding. It was a warning. The machines were coming.